So this is the first Meet the Farmer video in this course, and today we're going to be talking about why we need farmers. Everything that I share with you is my personal perspective, and it is based basically on our farming and what we do here. So I can't speak for anybody else in the industry in the UK at all. I'm literally speaking from personal experience and the way I think and feel about the industry. So I wanted to just go into a brief history of farming in the world and in the UK. So human beings have been around for hundreds and thousands of years, literally. And whether you're a human being now or a human being then, there are three key elements that we all need to keep us alive. And those three elements are air. We all need air. So they would have needed air however many thousand years ago, and we need air now. We also need water, and we've got some lovely water falling from the sky today. They would have needed water however many thousand years ago, and we need water today. And food, and they would have needed food however many thousand years ago, and we need food today. They are the three main things that any human being needs to be able to survive, whether you are here and now or whether you're hundreds of thousands of years ago when humans first walked the earth. Now, what I find incredibly fascinating is that for a very long time, human beings just hunted and gathered. And that would have been okay back then because the planet would have been wild. There would have been animals everywhere, there would have been loads of plants everywhere, and there would have been a choice of food for all human beings back then. But they would have had to have worked for it. They were going to have to hunt for their food. They were going to have to gather the seeds and the nuts and any vegetation they could find. And once that area had been kind of stripped of everything that they could eat, they would then have to pack up all their stuff and move to the next hunting site. So it would have been quite an intense life because they would have always had this kind of thought about any kind of wild animals they may encounter as well that might want to eat them rather than them eating the wild animals. So there was this kind of lifestyle, however many hundreds of thousands of millions of years ago, whenever, that they would have had, that was the hunting and gathering lifestyle. Well, as we all know, the human brain is quite incredible, and I think that as it goes through the generations, each generation is gifted with a new blueprint to basically enable them to make their lives better. So eventually, hunter-gatherers would have started thinking about how are we going to make it easier to have our food? How are we going to make it easier to grow food? How could we make it easier that we don't have to chase these animals around in the wild all the time, which is actually quite tiring. It would have been quite tiring for them. And this is when farming was birthed. So farming is and will always be the very first industry in the whole wide world ever developed. So farming and agriculture would have been the very first industry. And in fact, if we were to trace back every single industry we have now, whether that's technology, whether that's fuel, whether that's electricity, any kind of industry we have now, if we were to trace it back, would have come from agriculture and farming. It is the basis to everybody's survival. Now, back when they were hunter-gathering and they were like, we want to make life easier, they then decided to try and domesticate animals. So the first farming, I did a little bit of history yesterday. I did a little bit of reading up because I'd read this already, but I wanted to make sure that I knew it. So the first farming was actually in the Mediterranean, and it was in the Fertile Crescent, they called it. And the reason they started farming there was because they had regular rainfall. Excellent. We have regular rainfall in the UK, don't we? Which is amazing. So that means we can have really good farming. They so the Fertile Crescent was in like Syria, Israel, and Lebanon. That it's kind of in that area, and that's where they started farming. Now, it wasn't until 10,500 years ago that cattle and sheep were domesticated. So that meant that by some miracle, they were basically they must have intuitively decided, actually, let's try and domesticate cattle and sheep because it's going to be really useful for us. We could use the cattle, had multiple uses. So as well as pulling carts and plows and things like that, cattle were also used for food, obviously. And they were used as well to make clothes, their horns and their hooves and all those bits. So no part of the cattle was wasted. So 10,500 years ago, the amazing men and women of the time decided to domesticate cattle and sheep. And this was when the very first animal farming was created. They would have also, and this must all have been intuitively, and I think this is just evidence and proof that inside each and every individual there is a blueprint and a plan which is there to help us have a better life. Now, I believe that every generation has the ability to make their lives better, easier, whatever, to enjoy it more as we go on through. So it's not for us to look back and say, I wish that we were back in those days, because actually we're living in some of the most amazing times when it comes to what we have. So in the UK, there is an abundance of food. There is an abundance of water, as we can tell today. We've got lots of rain outside. And we do have air, and the UK is quite a green country as well. So it is sequestering a lot of its carbon and helping to generate more oxygen and things like that. So it's really, really fascinating to me how we've gone from 10,500 years ago. They decided they were going to domesticate animals so that they could have a better life, essentially. They then decided, we need some tools. So came the stonemasons, the people who were like, we could make some flint things and some whatevers. Then we would have had carpenters. So they would have been the woodmen of the day. They would have been building houses. They would have been, using their hands. And this, we have to bear in mind that when this was actually happening, there was no Google to say, build your own hut in 20 days. And they wouldn't have been able to Google it. This was all on intuition. This was all on them having a vision in their mind's eye and basically creating it with their hands and with their hearts, essentially. And we've come so far away from that intuitive kind of way of living and knowing what we need. For goodness sake, most of the time, I don't even know what I'm supposed to eat because I've been on and off diets for so many years now that I don't know if I should be eating this way, if I should be eating that way, if I should eat dairy, if I should eat wheat, should I eat vegetables? Who knows? So we don't even intuitively eat anymore. We're always waiting for somebody else to tell us what we are supposed to eat. Whereas back when farming first came into being, they would have known, we need to go and catch this, or we need to go and harvest the fruits because it's autumn and winter is coming. They would have known what the weather was going to be like, and they would have been able to adapt. Now, this is really fascinating, okay? So human beings have lived in the UK or Britain for 40,000 years. But the weather patterns were so volatile for a long, long time that they would either die or they would have to move off to warmer climates and then come back again. So actually, human beings have only been in the UK for 12,000 years. And the first farming didn't happen in the UK till 4,000 years ago. So basically 4,000 years ago in the Peak Districts, so it says on a history page I was reading yesterday, is where farming in the UK started. Now that may have been because someone came across land and decided they were going to start teaching us how to farm, or it may be again that they intuitively knew, okay, the weather's settling down, we don't seem to be freezing like we were freezing before. We've worked out this whole fire thing and we know everything. I reckon we could probably move into this country and start living in it and settling. And that was when the first settlers came in the UK. And that was when farming happened in the UK. So again, there was no other industry in the UK until farming. It was the very first industry because the humans hadn't worked out for 20 or 30,000 years how to even live in the UK without freezing to death or not having enough water or whatever. And so it's really fascinating how every single industry then has basically come through farming in whatever shape or form that is. And I think this is what we as a nation need to remember, because for some strange reason, a lot of the things that go wrong in this country seem to be our fault. And I'm not really sure why that is, but it happens. And that's okay. If everyone wants to believe that, that's okay. But from where I'm sitting as a farmer, so I have been a farmer all my life, 33 years. I've lived on the same farm. I've been brought up in all sorts of farming. And by farming, I just want to clarify, I mean anything that grows food. And by farmer, I mean anyone that has any interest in growing food, whether that's in the back garden, whether that's in pots indoors, or whether that is on a farm if you've been born on a farm. I feel that we all have a responsibility to grow food that is going to benefit us, that's going to improve our health, that is going to improve everything, you know, because if we've all got improved health, that is just going to, well, you know, the times we are currently living in where we are experiencing some crazy health challenges, you know, if we could actually just strip everything back and go back to that basic farming, you know, principles of growing food in soil, whether that's grains, whether it's vegetables, whether it's fruit, whether it's meat, whether it's whatever, clean water, whatever it is that we need to farm, we would actually improve not only our health and our family's health, but also the health of those around us. And I think we're in a critical time at the moment where everybody is actually thinking about their health, because we are currently in the midst of an invisible virus that we actually don't know how to combat. But what if we all had improved health, or we worked towards improving our health? Now, that's not just in the physical way, I mean by improving the quality of the food and things like that. It could mean improving your stress levels and your mental health and your emotional health. There's so many areas. But I believe that we as farmers have a key role to play in the future of this country, in the UK, because we can actually provide we can provide clean air, we sequester carbon, you know, any green plant is basically taking carbon dioxide out of the sky and putting it under the ground. Those plants need to be eaten by animals that eat grass, so cows and sheep, to enable us to then sequester more carbon, because the plant goes, holy moly, I've just been eaten. Oh my goodness, I've got to grow again. So it will suck in more carbon. It will put the carbon out through its roots, and it will release the oxygen, and it will have more energy to then grow again, and it will carry on. That is the basic carbon cycle, so we can clean the air. Any green plant can clean air. It's doing it all the time, and it doesn't have to be a tree. We can also help with water issues within the UK. So a lot of places are getting hit by flooding, and that's because we are having lots of rain jump out of the sky and come onto our ground where it should be soaking in like a sponge. But because of compaction and, driving heavier vehicles on the soil, and we haven't had this mind of growing the soil, we haven't got these big sponges anymore, so that when the rain comes down, instead of soaking in, it actually goes and just runs off the top, and it will run into wherever it ends up, which sadly is houses and villages and things like that. We also, on the other hand, if we have these big giant sponges of soil again, if we start working towards improving our soil structures, improving our carbon sequestration and all those things as farmers, we could create big sponges. This is what we need on our farm, to enable all this rain that falls on the ground to stay there, to stay in the soil. So it doesn't run off and run into our rivers and make them nice and brown, because it's just took all the topsoil with it, but it actually stays in the soil. So then if you come into a dry period, like a drought or something, it will then have enough water for the plants to continue growing. So then for us, that would be amazing, because our animals will still then have all the food they need all spring, all summer, and into the autumn and winter as well, because we will have been able to grow grass to be able to feed our animals. Now, at the moment, what helps us with that is the use of artificial fertilizers. So on our farm, we've relied on artificial fertilizer for our grass to grow. But actually, if we were to strip it back, like before the days of artificial fertilizer, the soils would have been taken care of so well, because they would have been used, there would have been horses and plows used rather than big old heavy tractors and pieces of machinery. So the compaction wouldn't have been so bad. And the soil would have been in a much better condition. So that would have grown more plants, grown more vegetables, to be able to then have good quality food from the soil. And so the key for me is soil. Now, not everybody in this country has a piece of soil, but there are so many of us who do. And I believe that if we just started to embrace a new way of looking at it, and it's happening all over the farming industry. We're having to look at the environment, we're having to look at the soil, it is happening, 100% it's happening. And for us, it's going to be the key thing for our business to survive, is to start going back to basics, basically, and living intuitively in like terms of what does our farm need, and how are we going to improve the health of our farm? How are we going to manage these bigger weather patterns? So like when it's raining loads, how are we going to store that rain so that we don't ever have a drought problem? How are we going to clean the waters so that, there's no nitrates flowing off into streams and stuff and making water downstream dirty for people to drink? It is coming within the industry, but we need encouragement. We need some encouragement from the British public, really, because it has been a very hard time that we feel as farmers, or this is my personal view, as I said at the beginning, that we are blamed for many things, and actually it's kind of like pointing a finger that shouldn't be pointed, because we are doing our absolute best and we are learning to farm in a different way, because we're being forced to now, just with everything the way it is, and things like that. So this is why it's so important to start teaching whoever wants to listen about farming and why it's so important to the UK, why it's so important to the world really, but I'm just talking about the UK and the UK economy, because it was the very first industry that was ever established, ever. So everything else that we now have, from mobile phones to the ability to fly an aeroplane, comes from farming. It is all based in farming. So there is a place for us, and there's a place for people as well, I believe, that want to come into farming, that haven't been born on a farm, or they have a real passion and they want to come into farming. I really feel that we're going into a time where there's going to be more and more people wanting to grow decent food, know where it comes from, know the quality of it, because they have their health in mind. They want healthy food so that their immune system can be boosted and can heal. The body needs to heal from, so many people have disease and, situations that they are carrying in their bodies. And actually, if you enable your body to go into a place of healing through your food, through water, through whatever that looks like for you. My healing process has been completely different to what another person's healing process would be. But farmers are so important to this country. And I think that's what my message is for anybody listening to this today, is if you're a farmer, please don't lose hope. There is a place for us, and it might look different than what it's looked for the last 100 years or so, but we are still so important. It was farmers who prevented this country starving after the First and Second World Wars. This country nearly starved, but it was the farmers who rallied together. They pulled everything out of the bag, literally, to make sure that we are still here today, that we have the ability to have amazing food right on our doorstep, to literally live in such a green country. They fought for our freedom in the First and Second World War. And it was the farmers who were relied upon to bring that food and the sustenance to the nation, to make sure that we could fight and keep fighting. And I believe we are currently fighting an invisible battle. It's an invisible health battle that none of us really knows about. None of us can see it, but it's moving. And it's just showing us, and I think it's really showing us, the health and the state of this country, and how have we even got ourselves to this place. So I encourage you today, don't lose hope. If you're a farmer, don't lose hope. And if you're not a farmer, but you would love to be a farmer of any description, then please pursue it. Because we in the industry that have been in it forever need you as well. We need you to challenge us and ask us questions, because it's so important. It's important that we come together for our children and future generations to make sure that we have a healthier environment, healthier food, and a healthier and more abundant lifestyle. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.